Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the EmTech Digital Stage, the editor-in-chief and publisher of the MIT Technology Review, Jason Ponton.
I know we've all been looking forward to this, so let's jump right in. Yesterday we discussed the rising expectations for virtual reality technologies. One company in particular has been receiving an extraordinary amount of buzz, and that's Magic Leap. Magic Leap is building technology which makes it possible to see 3D objects as if they were part of the real world. The technology is not yet available for you or I to experience, though MIT Technologies Review's own Rachel Metz did have the opportunity to visit Magic Leap's headquarters and experience the demo for herself. We found the technology so compelling that we named it one of our 2015 Breakthrough Technologies of the Year. And we did so because it is fundamentally different from any 3D technology we had ever seen before, including Oculus Rift. Most existing forms of virtual reality use a technology called Stereoscopic Vision. Essentially, the eye is fooled into seeing 3 dimensions by showing 2 planes of an image. You've all experienced this as a kind of cut-out pasting job, where the object in the foreground seems much closer than the object in the background. There are a couple of problems with this technology. One is, at least to my eyes, it's not convincingly 3-dimensional at all. The other problem is it has historically made people feel a little nauseated. Magic Leap essentially uses a light field, the same technology as holograms use, but instead it projects it onto the eye. So this technology was sufficiently revolutionary that it caught the attention of Google, which, amongst others, invested $500 million in the company. So the vision of Magic Leap is to redefine our expectations for what computer interfaces, intelligent systems look like in the real world. I'd like to invite to the stage the Magic leadership team who's responsible for creating this vision. Gentlemen, please join me on stage. Rony. These are Rony Abovitz, the founder and the president and the chief executive officer, Graeme Devine, the chief creative officer, and Neal Stephenson, the chief futurist. So, how many people in the room have heard of Magic Leap? So, almost all of them, Rony, but perhaps you should begin by saying what it is more eloquently and accurately than I did.
Well, first of all, Jason, thank you for inviting us here. And
you're very welcome.
I'll try to make it short because hopefully this is a fun conversation. The company was really started to look at personal computing and to bring back the idea of creativity and almost like hyper-personal computing. And I started to think about what does that mean. And you can't get much more personal than what we're doing in the sense that the way you sort of see and perceive the world, where your visual perception exists, I thought that would be an excellent place to put computing. So instead of having a device where there's like a phone or a tablet or a laptop where you look at a screen, like the screen in your head that builds the world, I thought that'd be an awesome place to do computing. And that was sort of the notion in kicking off the company. And we think it'll change everything.
So we're going to get into how it's going to change everything, but I want each one of you to briefly talk about your personal journey, about how you got to be on the stage, and then I'm going to ask Rony how he found you and convinced you to join the damn company. So let's begin with the actual founder. So, but your background isn't actually in this field particularly, right?
Well, I studied mechanical and biomedical engineering, so I did computer-assisted surgery. Actually started out doing computer-assisted brain surgery. Founded a company called Mako Surgical that was doing computer-assisted surgical robotics. One of our investors was Rodney Brooks from the MIT AI lab. And in there, we had done this thing with haptics, which is like virtual reality of touch. And it was a bit of a frustrating thing for me because we could do amazing, elegant, we probably built the best haptic system in the world, but I couldn't, have the visual with it. So you're getting the feeling, but not the sight. So you'd look at screens and displays, and I got to try all kinds of devices, and I started to wonder, why can't this work? And that sort of began a journey of magic. At least that's the investor part. The other part is, I think, being a kid growing up watching Star Wars, I was probably fated to do this. So.
And Graeme, your journey?
My journey started in the 70s making games for the TRS-80, and I wanted to make Battlestar Galactica come to life, and I just kept on making games. I got expelled from school because I was making a game called Pole Position, and then made a game called Seventh Guest and 11th Hour, and a game called Quake 3, and made one of the Halo games, and slowly wanted to, find out what was next, and that's the adventure of Magic Leap, I think.
And Neal?
Well, there was a time about 30 years ago when everybody was rendering pictures of floating balls. It was the floating ball era of computer graphics, floating mirrored spheres using ray tracing. And I saw somebody doing that with a souped-up Macintosh 2 and got excited about it, and then got unexcited when I found out how expensive it was. And so I just started thinking about what it would take to make that kind of experience cheap enough for ordinary people to use it, and used television as an analogy. TVs used to be expensive, and then they got cheap because of I Love Lucy. I wrote a book called Snow Crash, which includes a vision of a thing called the metaverse, which is sort of the I Love Lucy of virtual reality, I guess you could say. And people read it, and about 30 years later, Graeme and some other guys showed up on my doorstep with a legendary sword and invited me to join Magic Leap, so here I am. Yeah.
How did you convince these guys to come and work for Magic Leap?
Well, I'll start with Neal. The sword story is true. So one of I would call him a creative co-founder of the company with me, a guy named Sir Richard Taylor. He started a company in New Zealand called Weta, which created The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and Avatar with Peter Jackson and all that. So we had an ability to meet Neal. And I was like, well, what are we going to bring? Like, what kind of gift? So I was talking with Richard. It's like, well, let's bring Orcrist, from The Hobbit, the actual Orcrist sword. And we figured that'll at least get us a beer. And I think it did.
It did. Got a beer.
It did. And then we brought Neal by, and we had to show him that we weren't full of crap, basically. And I think then it was to have him join as our futurist, which is really not. It's not what Neal calls like a gaseous kind of esoteric. He actually gets pretty hands-on in building things.
Well, I'm going to ask him in a second what a chief futurist actually does at Magic Leap. And how did you recruit Graeme?
So Graeme, there was kind of a member. We have like this outer circle of advisors in the company that are sort of out there looking at the world of interesting people. And somehow Graeme responded to one of them and somehow agreed to come in our garage days.
No, I said no originally.
Yeah, a lot of times.
It was no.
And then I remember we had this long dinner where I didn't think Graeme believed anything I was saying at all. And then you could finish the rest of it.
He was drawing on the table with a marker pen, black holes and photons and eyeballs, and it was insane. And I was like, I'm going to get on the flight home now. And then I showed up in a strip mall the next morning, and there was a guy with a white coat on showing me a demo that I stuck my eyeballs into, and there was a monster hanging out on the table, and it was moving around, and it was absolutely unbelievable. And then, about halfway through the demo, another monster stood up in the back of the room that I hadn't noticed was there because I was so focused on the one in the foreground, and it stood up and said hello. And I was like, holy crap, because I thought I had a pretty good handle on technology, and That was exactly the point there. Exactly.
But hold on to that idea. I mean, I think it's worthwhile for the people in the audience who haven't read the Technology Review story to talk about how radical this blurring between the human world we already know and this created world that you're developing is. So it's not augmented reality exactly, and it's not virtual reality. It's something new and different.
Yeah, I was calling it cinematic reality, but I think the term mixed reality makes sense because it moves you from the like an augmented world where you think about digital things with you to completely digital and the whole spectrum. But probably the best way to think about it, and I'll have the guys jump in too, the way we experience visual reality is we have this dynamic interface with a huge ocean of light outside of us. There's this light field, which is really not a hologram. It's a dynamic wavefront of light that goes all the way to the ends of the universe that's bouncing off of everything. And it makes our way in. So imagine we have these like rivers of light or light sculptures that are continuously interacting with our eye-brain system. And that, through many years of evolution, our brain evolved to build the world that we perceive inside us. We sort of sip from this enormous light field and we build what we see as the world, and we really did that in order to survive as people. Most of our visual perception is what we needed to evolve to survive, and we're mimicking that. So I think what we're doing is, if you think about blurring the line between digital and physical, the visual reality component, I think what we're doing, you can call neurologically true. We just don't do atoms.
Yet.
Yes.
Yet. That's another company.
Guys, sketch for me what this might look like, I won't say in 10 years, but in 5 years. So the obvious application is gaming, but it's actually going to be much more potentially broadly used than that. What will the experience of using a product like Magic Leap be in 5 years?
I think it's actually going to be an inspirational, everyday thing that you use and put on, and it helps you throughout the day. I think gaming is a great place to start because it's people who make games, they make games that live in the world. And games respond to you, and they do things with you, and they have AIs in them, and they present you with a challenge. When you make software that's hanging out right here, and and being on stage, and running around the room, and going out the door and stuff, kind of like a game. So it's continually interactive. It continues to interact with you. And so our thinking is that game developers have a very good approach to making software that does exist. I think as we go forward in time, we'll have software that makes you better as a human and smarter as a human. I mean, right now we develop on top of an SDK for Unity and Unreal, and that makes things alive in the world. But soon enough, it'll just be software that hangs out and lives, I think. Interesting times.
Neal, would you do a bit of speculative non-fiction for me and describe the world of 5 to 10 years from now?
Well, we have appliances that we use right now to get access to the computed world. Those appliances get better over time, and occasionally we have a jump from something like a printer to a screen, let's say. Pretty big transition that I was around for. And then from big bulky screens to smaller screens that we can carry around with us. And each one of those jumps makes the previous competitor look kind of big and old and silly. If you look at an old movie now and you see somebody talking on a big old cell phone or working on a large CRT computer monitor, it just looks weird. This is just kind of the next step in that evolution. It'll be a thing that is more convenient to use and it delivers better results. Instead of looking at a two-dimensional rectangle, you can, in theory, look at anything that can be painted onto the eye.
So this question's for Rony. You raised more than $500 million, 500 million from Google, or thereabouts, correct me if I'm wrong. Why does a company that is still basically an R&D facility need $500 million? This morning we heard from from Stuart Butterfield, who has $300 million in cash, and he's just going to sit on it. Uber uses its money for business development. Why do you need $500 million for R&D?
Right, so we've raised $592 million to date from Google's one of our lead investors, but we have Andreessen, Kleiner, Paul Allen's Vulcan Ventures, this whole group. A few things. One, I would say we're out of the R&D phase in real product development and in the transition to what you call like new product introduction, where we just took out a big facility, like almost 300,000 square feet, where we're setting up pilot manufacturing lines and how you would fabricate this. But probably the heart of it is that I think we did two really unique things in the company that aren't part of any kind of Moore's Law growth. One, we showed that you can create this digital light field signal and it works. And we did that kind of as a first proof. But then we've been able to transfer that into something which I would equate to like an Intel chip. You know, think of what Intel did with silicon, where you have a three-dimensional matrix that manipulates electrons and makes them do really cool things. We're doing that with photonics. We've created what I would call a photonics light field chip. That's a three-dimensional matrix with nanostructures. So we're doing like some very fundamental new kinds of, not quite silicon, but sort of silicon photonics that enable these brand new experiences. So there is no off-the-shelf stuff that allows what we're describing to occur. So the amount of capital we're raising was basically to really go to the moon. If you're going to do something really breakthrough and transformational, and for us it was not just the raw development of tech, but tech that matched what the body needed. That was our goal. Like our going to moon is this physiologic matching, which means that we can't force the body to stuff this off the shelf. We had to design it against the body's needs, and that meant doing brand new things with materials, with how to process and fabricate them. So that's what we're doing, and that requires some serious capital.
If you're doing fundamentally new things with photonics and nanomaterials, does that mean you're going to have a brand new fabrication technique for some of these ideas?
Yes, and we do, and we have that up and running, and we have our main facility is in Florida. We also have we do some computer science out here in Mountain View. We have a team in LA. We also now have a team in Texas that's working with us on. Really, we do have a pilot fabrication of this. I will call it nano fabrication of what it will be, this light field chip. So this is why we're not talking a lot about things, but we are doing some really breakthrough stuff that's not just taking a cell phone screen and putting it in front of your face, really doing fundamental things on how we can manipulate photons to be biomimetic and how your body wants to receive them.
So this question's for all three of you. Without asking you to predict product releases, which I promised I wouldn't do, what is the biggest nut to crack in terms of getting this product ready for commercialization? What don't you know how to do now that you need to learn how to do?
Kick it off to Neal, and then we'll make our way back.
Well, I'm mostly thinking about content. So I'll answer from that point of view. We don't know necessarily how to make content that's going to work on this. I mean, I think we will know, but it's a new area, and everything has to be kind of rebuilt from scratch. You can't just take an existing video game, even though that video game might be rendered on a three-dimensional world. You can't take that three-dimensional world and simply dump it into a medium like this and have it work. You can't use the same user interface. So that's a thing that I don't know how to do yet.
Well, that's really interesting. So we'll require not just new interfaces and new means of manipulating this reality, but we might need new storytelling techniques.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. I think we've gotten slowly better at thinking in that direction. I mean, at first when you show up at Magic League, you're like, photons everywhere, it's going to be great, and I'm going to live in the world and run around with ray guns and be great. And then you slowly work out the world is pretty darn awesome. The world is pretty darn incredible as is. Any photon you add to it better be really, really special. and better add value to it. And how do you tell stories in this that are much better than going to be on my Xbox, or much better than going to be on my PlayStation? Because they should be much, much better. They should mix reality so well that you're adding to your life. There is stuff happening in my house last night that was so incredible. You got to come see it.
Can you give me an example, Graeme, of the types of photons that would be so incredible it would change the way we interacted with the world?
Wouldn't it be fun if you were... Okay, I'll tell you a secret. Wouldn't it be fun?
We have a safe word in case.
Yeah.
Could well come up.
Yet, go.
But wouldn't it be fun if you were able to interact with a ghost and have a ghost come to your house and have a ghost haunt you and have things that you were able to go and play with, that you're able to interact with, they're able to show, hey, can you go get a knife and fork and I'll show you a trick? You go get a knife and fork from your kitchen and the ghost interacts with those real things. That's something that you can't do on an Xbox. You can't do that on a PlayStation.
We make really good ghosts.
She's interacting with you, with your real world in your house. You go to work the next day. What did you do last night? Well, Ghost showed me how to set a table in proper English form. I know how to do that now.
I mean, a really great visual experience to think through for the audience to relate is think like Harry Potter in the Hogwarts world where you're a wizard or wizard in training. We're literally creating a world like that. It doesn't mean it's all magical with dragons and stuff, but the idea that there are the wizards that see this entire information world come alive and we rip open your phone and it just flies everywhere. And then the Muggle world, which is still holding a laptop or a tablet or something, where it's contained, and that's really what the future is going to look like. And we're giving people a paintbrush to paint all over the world, which I think for creatives will be an amazing thing of all kinds, whether you're an engineer or an app developer or a painter or a game designer. I think you're going to have experiences, which is kind of interesting. We've been very passive. Like you sit and watch a Harry Potter movie. Instead, you will be Harry Potter, and you'll tell stories about it later. Those stories are what are movies, but people will now have much more experiential, deeper connectivity between their physical being and these digital imaginative things they want.
Or imagine I could be a much better stage presence because I am seeing information about everyone in the room as I'm actually going along, and I'm having better conversations. I'm a smarter person. I'm remembering 4 out of the 5 things I always forget in every conversation because something's aiding me as I'm having a conversation. And you soon realize that
Rick Perry at the presidential debate.
Any of the
he would have been able to remember the 3
automatic fact checking.
Yeah, all 3 departments he was going to.
Graeme, you are a legend in gaming. How does Magic Leap compare, if it compares at all, to previous companies you've worked for, where you might have had a platform to build on?
It's the closest thing is actually kind of to the iPad. We didn't have any iPads to begin with, but we had the iPhone. You could touch it, and you can feel it, and you knew what touch was like. And everything's always existed on a 2-dimensional screen throughout my life. From the TRS-80 on, everything's been on a 2D screen. And I've gone to it, or taken it out of my pocket and looked at it and held it. And now, for the first time, I'm designing software where it can run along next to me. It can walk out the room. It can be on my desk. I don't have to go to it anymore. It can come to me at any time. And it takes a little while to wrap your head around that. It really is kind of a huge mind shift in terms of design. I mean, most application design is really a hurry up and show me something. Show me the weather, show me the word processor, show me a web page, and then wait for the human to do something. Wait for input. Games are a little bit different in that you'll typically be shot dead if you wait around and don't do anything. But they are continual interactive loops. And I think the software that we're making is more continual interactive loops that do interesting things that add to your life. And it's hard because you can't put an ad on our website to say, hey, we need people to think about, it's like we need to train people how to think differently. And software in this world is incredibly different.
But you do have some news you can announce to the audience here today, even if we can't talk about product releases. You you are going to start training developers at least
Yeah.
to begin thinking about this as a platform.
And we do work on top of an SDK, and our SDK is, it's a software developer kit, and it works with Unreal and it works with the Unity engines. And we actually, that's something that you can go to our website and sign up under the developer tab to go get some more information about. And we'll soon be telling you a lot more about that. But we're really excited to start talking about that a little bit now.
There's an SDK, it exists, kind of.
It is an SDK, it exists, we actually make software for this
and
thing.
people can begin thinking about this as a
I cannot wait for people to begin thinking about that. Because the awesome stuff's not going to come from us, it's going to come from everyone out there.
Because this is a sufficiently new way of thinking about interfaces that it can't possibly be done by Magic Leap alone.
No, we're completely about having a very wide open platform for every app and game developer, artist, filmmaker, writer, what have you. And basically we're going to open it up for the world. And what's interesting is it's a completely new interface, but it's also really old in the sense that if you erase technology, go back a couple hundred years, we know how to live in the world. So by making computing much more interactive with how our biology is, what I really want to train people to do is think that way. Like our biology is tuned to interact with the spatial universe in a particular way. We already know how to do it. UIs will already know how to do that. So I think that's going to be one of the interesting things, except things might levitate or they can go through walls. But shamans would have known that.
So Philip Rosedale was talking about this yesterday. He was saying that one of the things that virtual reality lacked was a standard set of gestures or interfaces. Will Magic Leap have to develop a common gestural language, or will it be a gestural language which you've borrowed from the real world, or some combination of the two?
Right, so I would say we're not going to tell you everything about UI today that we're doing, but we are doing some really, I'd say, groundbreaking things. But in UI, I think you have to think the real world is a messy place. It's not a little rectangle where everything can be very orderly. So it is a multi-sensory input. We're building a perceptual computing suite that senses the world. I think the idea, what was the thing that for the palm, that graffiti language? If we try to do graffiti language with gestures, I think it'll end up the same thing with graffiti language, which is we don't really use it. I think what we're trying to do is reduce all friction into what we already know how to do. That's probably the most successful thing, to reduce physiologic friction, psychologic friction, then this kind of thing could take off. So we're getting really obsessive about, I don't want to have to teach you that many new things. One of our tests for a good UI is I'm 5 years old, in 10 seconds I know what I'm doing. That's a high bar. I hope we can sit here at some point in the not too distant future and say we've achieved that. But I think what we're doing visually opens the door for that. You don't have to remap your brain to a new paradigm like a screen. We know how to operate in the world. So we want to almost take the artificial mapping of things that we had to learn back to things we know how to do because we're sort of born in this earth and we know how to act in the physical world. So to us, that's really what we're chasing, a much more naturalistic interface.
Neal, what does a chief futurist do? I warned you I'd ask.
I oversee all of the junior futurists. And
He runs our accounting department.
No, I don't know. The future begins now, right? So my attitude towards it is that we get to the future through the present, and so I'm trying to take a pretty practical nuts and bolts attitude towards this, and looking for things that I can actually do in the near term. And then that's a way of learning how this stuff works and what's hard and what's easy, what's fun, what isn't, and then kind of building from there. That's the kind of insight that I think is needed to begin thinking about the future. And I hope it'll take long enough that I won't actually ever have to think about the future. It'll just show up, So.
At Magic Leap, is the art driving the science, or is the science driving the art, or is it a interactive and self-reinforcing process?
Well, it's early days. My general take on this is that every established medium tends to kind of settle on its killer app that becomes the darling of the people who fund projects. And so in movies, we've kind of settled on superhero blockbusters. There's other kinds of movies, but that's where all the money goes. In games, it tends to be first-person shooters. So we have first-person shooters now with $500 million budgets. I think that when a new technology is coming online, and we don't quite know what to make of it yet, which is the kind of cool place we're at with this, that there's a period where it's really interesting, and where it's not only possible but desirable for a lot of people to try new things. That's kind of where we are with this. I think anyone who comes out and says, "Oh, I know what the killer app for this is going to be," has got to be wrong. Most of them are probably sincere, but they're wrong anyway. And I'm one of those people. It would be kind of fatuous for me to claim that I could come up with that killer app, but I'm going to work on some, and more importantly, what we need to do is to create an environment where a lot of other people can try stuff.
When you were imagining metaverses 20-something years ago, see if I can articulate this, does Magic Leap look cooler than you imagined it would?
It looks a lot more cheerful.
Huh. Your vision is essentially dystopian and bleak, Neal.
That's what they tell me. I don't think Snow Crash is quite as dystopian as it's cracked up to be, but I can see why it's read that way. I think that what you're seeing in the fictional world of Snow Crash, which I wrote a long time ago, is sort of my then vision of the end state of something. And we're at the beginning of this, and so it's more fun, it's more unpredictable, it's more uncertain still, and it's an interesting place to be.
Graeme, are there innovations in gaming that could be usefully applied to other verticals using the Magic Leap technology?
Oh yeah, I think we think a lot about communication. We think a lot about consumption of classic media as well as new media, and we think a lot about how we can make you smarter as a human. And I think what we do in game design there helps us think about how communication is going to work. Because, I want the holograms from Star Wars. I want to hold a little thing in my hand and for the Emperor to come up, and, that's gamey, but it's awesome. I want to be able to, have the media consumption and be able to go do that, and that's video gamey, but awesome. And I want that world that's Tony Stark lives in. I want Jarvis. I want useful Jarvis, not the Jarvis that goes crazy. But I want that world, and I want that to exist, and I think that comes from game designers. So yeah, I think it's interesting.
Rony, I don't want to ask how many people currently work at Magic Leap, but it's more than perhaps many people in the audience know. You're in the process of building a culture at the company, and having been an entrepreneur before, I guess I'm interested in how the culture of Magic Leap differs from your medical company culture, and what you'd like the culture to be as it evolves.
Sure. So I'd say that we're in the hundreds of people and growing very rapidly right now as we're moving into the productization and new product introduction parts of manufacturing and getting to operations. So we're not a garage startup anymore. The culture to me is like one of the things I obsess about 24/7 all the time. I think a root principle is that we're at heart an artistic and creative company that its vision of what we're trying to do is always forecasting just ahead of where our tech team is, but that's inspiring and pulling the technology team forward. So I spend a lot of time bringing like all kinds of people to the company great directors, rock bands, Dave Gibbons, who did Watchmen, all kinds of people from the creative world who have been inspiring people like Neal, people like Graeme, to create an environment where creativity and anything is possible. And we had a couple things happen that really showed me this was the way forward, and that culture shouldn't stop. Because when you get too locked into a pure engineering culture, you forget what the human mind is capable of and the creativity unlockable in the human mind. We made black with light, and that's not possible. But it was two artists on the team who thought about the problem, and all of our physicists and engineers were like, well, you can't make black, it's not possible. But they forgot that what we're doing, the whole world that you experience is actually happening in here, and this can make anything. And they kind of showed us the way forward. And the whole framework of our engineering team had to change at that point, because it was like they were physics, and then it was like physics and neurobiology together. That's where magic exists. And that idea that the artists in the team kind of led that way forward. It sort of created a bridge between, we have creative teams in the company, although the engineers, I have to say this to them, they'll get really pissed off if I don't call them creative. So we think of creative technical people and creative content people, but I think of a whole community of people that believe something is possible and then have the chops to do it. So think of like if you were going to the moon. You'd go to Cape Canaveral, which is just a couple hours north of us in Florida, and you wanted to be part of that. You wanted to go to the moon. And
so we're saying, where are you in Florida?
Our main headquarters is, I would call it Fort Lauderdale, but we started in Hollywood, and we're in a little tiny sleepy town called Dania Beach. So we're the least Silicon Valley located company. Probably you guys have had up here. But we do have a footprint in Mountain View and a couple other things. But I think the idea that I brought Apollo astronauts to Magic Leap to help inspire the team, and their idea was, if you were part of that group, there was no not going to the moon, and that imagination of going to the moon, that mission and the time frame, created a lot of creative breakthroughs in scientists and everyone around it. So that's kind of our atmosphere, but it is grounded in, you can't just sit and dream, you actually have to make things happen. So we're like a dream factory where you dream something and then make it happen. It's almost like a science fiction movie where then you make the thing real. The rate of speed at which we're doing that is pretty cool, but we can't do anti-gravity yet, we don't do atoms. But
you make it sound very countercultural. You make it sound like the early days of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I'm like insanely inspired by like Stuart Brand, the whole mid to late 60s Bay Area. We're here, that whole countercultural scene, and how like the homebrew computing club and personal computers came out of that as devices to empower and inspire people and make an individual better. Magic Leap is really a return to that, where we want to amplify a single person. We don't want to harvest groups of people. We don't want to harvest your data. We want to make a single person better, which I think if you go to the roots of personal computing, it was to take it away from the big data IBM and to make it very personal and enriching to your life. And that is exactly what we're trying to do.
So that's what Jobs wanted, right? He wanted computers as a mechanism, as a means of self-expression. How do you take that personal culture and simultaneously work with companies that are perhaps not fully committed to that vision, like Google, Kleiner Perkins? How do you translate that creative countercultural vision to your investors?
Well, they invested. And
yes.
They know where I'm at. I mean, one of the interesting things you brought up is like everyone has like a personal Buddha, and I never understood what that meant, where you have to kill the Buddha in the road. Like I grew up on the Mac. I was like obsessed with that, and then I realized to do Magic Leap, I had to kill that. Like that vision of what a computer was, I had to just mentally destroy it, and in that nothingness, like out of that came Magic Leap. So I just had to smash like what a computer was. All the things I grew up with, all the things I love, and realized that's not the way forward. That's over. That's the Buddha you have to destroy. And then from that destruction comes an entirely new world. And literally it was a process like that that gave birth to the company. So I had to go back to the roots of why these people did these things. And it was like, it was the magic bus and all kinds of fun things. And that froth from which emanated something really cool.
Do you have any advice for how many people in the room are entrepreneurs? So for the entrepreneurs in the room who want to start a company and have a radical vision, what advice would you give them?
Oh my God. You have to have great confidence in your vision. I think that's really key, and it needs to be a good one. I think surrounding yourself with not just like-minded people, but by inspiring people that believe in what you're doing and how you're going to positively change the world. It's going to sound a bit odd, but I do believe the universe opens doors for you. If you have the right idea and you bring the right sort of creative tribe around you, it's like the world does open the doors. And it's a little bit like surfing, where you have to follow it. And there's this, this Taoist kind of river you're on. And you have to be able to detect that flow. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, probably don't be an entrepreneur. Go work for one of the great companies. But if you have that, like Larry Page talked about, the entire vision for Google showed up in a dream. These things this is how it works. The top point of why these companies exist often is some kind of creative, inspirational thing, no different from any kind of art. And if you don't think of your company as a form of art that you're passionately inspired by, that's your purpose in life, probably don't do it.
That's a great segue to my last question for all three of you. What is that Larry Pagian vision, the art of Magic Leap? What is the company? So I know what Google is. Google wants to index and organize all the world's information, and Steve wanted to make insanely great machines, and Bill wanted to put a computer in every home and in every desktop. What is Magic Leap?
Start with me.
Let's start with Neal.
Well, one I think index of success that we were talking about the other day is making a hardware that's good enough that it seems like it doesn't matter anymore. It kind of disappears, and what you're left with is what that hardware is delivering. That's paradoxical, because in order to achieve that, you've got to do a moonshot in the area of hardware. I'm interested personally in working on experiences that can be delivered through that kind of a medium once we're there.
Graeme, as the artist developer, what is the art of Magic Leap?
What is the art of Magic Leap? We actually call ourselves leapers at the company, and I go in.
Leapers.
Leapers.
That's great.
And I go in every day, and I see. We have a kitchen area, and in the kitchen area there's rocket scientists, and there's artists, and there's comic book authors, and there's authors, and there's optics people, and there's programmers, and there's CG people, and there's absolutely the craziest set of people that you've ever put together. And I get to work together with them every single day. And I think working together on making humans better. And I think, yeah, there's crazy hardware on the way, there's optics, there's games, there's all sorts of things. But I think at the end of the day, we're about changing the world and making humans better. And I can't think of a crazy group of people that I want to go do that with. That's the art.
Ray, the last word to you. What is the vision of Magic Leap?
I want to bend computing to what makes us human, what makes us people, and to have that unleash an innate human creativity and empowerment and amplification of what makes us people. Because I think the world lacks in that. We have destruction and wars, and the solution to everything seems to be a non-creative solution. So if we can become like a creative amplifier for the brain society, in the most naturalistic way possible, I'd love that.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Leapers. Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Graeme. Thank you. Thanks so much.